This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for joining us. This week marks a major milestone for the Trump administration. Tomorrow, Donald Trump will celebrate his 100th day back in the White House. And for those on the left who might not have noticed this yet, 100 days of Trump back in power, and guess what? Democracy has not ended. Would you believe it? Turns out all those claims that he was a big threat to democracy were lies. How strange is that? But it is a significant point and worth reflecting on his leadership. And as we look back at the first 100 days of Trump's second administration, there is no question it has been extraordinary. After 4 years of President Joe Biden, who didn't even know how to walk off the stage and had to get to bed at 8 o'clock each night, America now has a real leader who is without doubt putting America first. Donald Trump has brought common sense back, and finally, the world has a president who is bold and willing to think big. And just to recap some of what we've seen in the last 100 days, Trump has signed at least 137 executive orders, which is more than any president over that same time period in at least the last 70 years. He's stripped away dangerous DEI initiatives. He's backed Elon Musk and Doge to cut waste from federal departments, dismantling USAID projects after astronomical levels of waste and fraud were found. The Doge tracker claims a total of $160 billion has been saved so far, which is almost $1,000 per taxpayer. And the southern border is essentially closed, with around 95% less people coming across the border. Here is Border Czar Tom Homan at the White House today.
I've had this for over 40 years. I worked for 6 presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan. Every president I ever worked for took border security seriously, because you can't have national security if you don't have strong border security. We got to know who's coming in, what's coming in, where's coming in, why it's coming in, right? Even President Obama and President Clinton took some steps to secure the border because they understood national security was important. Joe Biden was the first president in the history of this nation who came into office and unsecured a border on purpose. That's just a fact.
And that is an important reminder of just how crucial last year's election was. As we know, Kamala Harris was the border czar, so she was just as responsible as Joe Biden for opening up the border. Now, Donald Trump has been criticised probably more than any other leader that I can think of, with many even on the right criticising him for this trade war, which is already bringing dozens of countries to the negotiating table in pursuit of fair and reciprocal trade with the United States. Donald Trump is rewriting the rules and delivering on his promises.
We will make America wealthy again. We will make America healthy again. We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again.
Joining us now is James Billow, editor at Unheard. James, great to see you again. It's a big day for Donald Trump tomorrow, marking 100 days since he's been back in power. Look, love him or hate him, he's certainly a bold leader. He's been brave enough to shake things up, to do things differently, and it's been so refreshing to have a fierce, strong leader after years of the Biden administration. Look, many people see him as a disruptor. How would you assess his first 3 months?
Well, I completely agree with that assessment. And we even had The Atlantic magazine coming out describing Trump as one of the most consequential presidents in living memory, if not American history. So without question, whether you like him or hate him, he has made a huge difference, and he's really challenging the status quo. I'd say he has scored some massive victories already, particularly on immigration. He's cracked down on the border. They are now, illegal crossings are now at record lows. He's finally returned the gender question to some common sense.
Yes.
On DEI, he's gutted the departments in federal agencies, and that's had this ripple effect that you're seeing across corporate America, who were, let's not forget, one of the biggest proponents of these practices during that BLM 2020s era. So yes, I think he can point to a lot of successes in his first 100 days. There are going to be some question marks, of course. Ukraine, Russia still rumbling on. Let's see if he gets a deal there. Israel, Palestine, that's not quite nearing a conclusion either. But all in all, it's been a fascinating 100 days and really interesting one to cover.
Certainly a fascinating 100 days. And on those points of Ukraine and also Israel, Gaza, he's certainly made steps forward far more than the Biden administration. Now, the White House lawn is currently lined with posters of 100 of, quote, the worst illegal immigrant criminals that have been arrested in the first 100 days of President Trump's second term. Now, these posters also list the crimes that that person is accused of committing. Some include rape, murder, and distributing fentanyl. Now, it's interesting where this has been placed around the White House because it's in eyeshot of all the TV reporters. So this hasn't exactly gone down well with some outlets that are part of the mainstream media.
Well, exactly right. And you can't forget that Trump is a showman and he is leaning into the issue where he polls strongest. Immigration from the get-go has been his defining and most pivotal issue that he's campaigned on. And quite frankly, he's had a huge amount of success on it, particularly with regard to the border. So what he's doing here, yes, he's firing up the base without doubt, but it's also serving to rankle Democrats and try and ensnare them in a position so they end up defending some of these people, like you said, taking fentanyl across the border, first-degree murder, battery, all these different kind of charges that would be unacceptable for any kind of citizen. But for some reason, if you're an illegal immigrant, you get treated to a different standard. So without question, he's really trying to goad the Democrats into biting. And, quite unsurprisingly, a lot of the mainstream media outlets did exactly that. So 1-0 Trump.
Absolutely. Well, let's look at the Democrats. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Cory Booker hosted a sit-in on the Capitol steps in protest against the GOP budget. They claim that the budget proposal is reckless and immoral. They were there for nearly 12 hours and they said that this was a significant moral moment in America. Well, let's just take a look. James, what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree? Was it really the moral moment they claimed that it was?
I just find these calls to morality and moral equivalency just absolutely bizarre. And I really just cannot make heads or tails of what they are trying to achieve here. It's this kind of gesture politics that was so symptomatic of the 2016 era. And we're just reliving that moment again and again and again. And it is so frustrating to watch. But for me, the most frustrating thing is you've got a lawmaker here sitting on the steps doing what any kind of member of public could do when actually you could go into Congress and actually try and challenge and shape the law rather than just sitting on the steps complaining about it. So the whole thing just seems bizarre, it's performative, and it's just symptomatic of a bygone era that I don't think anyone wishes to return to.
So performative. I mean, 12 hours sitting on the steps, surely there's better things that they could be doing with that amount of time. Now, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritskar delivered a fiery speech in New Hampshire, slamming the, quote, do-nothing Democrats. And he really didn't hold back, blasting the Democrats for flocking to podcasts, which, appears to be a bit of a swipe at Gavin Newsom. And he also accuses the Democrats of not really accepting the blame for their own lack of guts. Take a listen to this. And his comments have fueled speculation about a possible 2028 presidential run. What's your thoughts?
Oh, there's no question that he's running, and this is a pretty clear pitch towards that. And I think what these comments make clear, as his previous comments have as well, is that he's really angling for capturing that progressive lane. One thing Pritzker has to be careful about is that there is a lot more energy being generated in that progressive lane from the likes of Bernie Sanders and AOC. So he's actually got a lot of work to do in that department. It's pretty clear, as you say, he is coming after the likes of Gavin Newsom and also Pete Buttigieg, who recently went on the Flagrant podcast with Andrew Schultz. But this strategy is a failed strategy. I just do not know what the logic of this move is. We've quite clearly seen that in 2016 and even 2020 with the election of Joe Biden, the American public does not want a progressive leading either the Democrats or the country, and it's a failed initiative. So I do not understand why he's attacking so hard the left here. He clearly thinks that will be such a heavy reaction to the Trump presidency that for some reason Americans will swing all the way back across. But I think what we've seen with the 2020s is that Americans absolutely do not want to return to that time. And Pritskar is launching a failed abortive campaign before it even begins.
I want to speak to you, James, about this judge that's been busted for allegedly helping an illegal immigrant evade ICE. This Wisconsin judge was arrested for allegedly helping an illegal immigrant evade law enforcement and is now facing up to 10 years behind bars. This is Milwaukee County Circuit Court Judge Hannah Dugan, and she was arrested last week on charges of obstruction of justice. Now, it's interesting because Democrats are condemning her arrest. Many, of course, are the same people who claim that no one is above the law. What's your take on this all?
Well, I agree. The spectacle of law enforcement arresting a judge is an ugly sight, but why a judge is directing an illegal immigrant out of her own courtroom through a side door while federal immigration agents are waiting to arrest that individual and somehow expecting to get away from it is beyond me. Once again, Democrats have taken the bait here. They are not challenging Trump on other aspects of his immigration policy, which is a bit more problematic potentially. But this is, again, another issue where he's played them completely like fools, because what you see here is this is a man who not only entered the country illegally, he shouldn't be there. Yeah. She has obstructed ICE agents from doing their job. And also, if you actually look at this guy's record, he struck his roommate something like 30 times. He struck his roommate's girlfriend, and he struck his roommate's girlfriend's cousin. So this guy is hardly a saint. And once again, Democrats are rallying to the defense of these extremely problematic figures when actually they should be coming for, the ordinary American citizens whose lives have been disrupted by people like this.
Absolutely. James Billow, editor at Unheard, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you.
Joining us now is Hillary Fordwich, president and founder of Strelmark. Hillary, it's great to see you. US President Donald Trump and Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky have spoken one-on-one for the first time since Zelensky was rightfully kicked out of the White House after being reminded by Donald Trump he doesn't have the cards. Now, the conversation unfolded in the Vatican ahead of the funeral of Pope Francis on Saturday, and it was an incredible photograph of the two leaders. Now, the White House said that it was a very productive discussion, and Trump has been really voicing his frustration with Russia recently, and he's been urging Russia to stop the attacks. Hillary, I want to get your assessment of this meeting between Trump and Zelensky, where the relationship really stands between the two leaders at the moment, and also Trump's language around Russia that appears to have stepped up.
Yes, I'm smashing to be back with you again, Gabriella. A few things here. It was actually very interesting to hear President Trump's sort of exact words. He had said, Vladimir, he called him Vladimir, not people. Vladimir, stop. I mean, I personally, being a mother, I thought it was the kind of thing you say to a child in a toddler chair. And it did really verbalize his frustration. I think he's very frustrated. I think that was, yes, and it was particularly after the Easter strikes. Here were just, Christians, people, regular people going to church on Easter Sunday. And the Russians, after there was a sort of a tentative agreement of a ceasefire, they just killed innocent civilians. And I don't think there's any leader, any nation, or any decent person that would think that that was acceptable. So I think that was a contributing factor. Yes. And then you had this conversation. I think what's interesting is to look at the body language and what came out of it, Gabriella. The body language was definitely of Trump, being engaged and listening. And certainly Zelensky looked, sort of very adamant and strong in his position there. What we've heard and what has come out, and I was actually at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday night, the general agreement is that, or what we've heard to be in agreement, is that Zelensky, who had said that he would not concede Crimea, is now agreeing that maybe he has to concede in Crimea. And so that everybody remembers, Putin went into Crimea under Obama's watch. And what President Trump has said is, that was not my war. This is not my war. This all happened under Obama, under Biden. It is President Trump that's trying to stop the killing, but the actual war started with Putin going into Crimea under Obama, and Obama did nothing. He was worse than Chamberlain in the Second World War. He didn't even raise a white hanky. He did nothing.
Absolutely. Look, it's interesting. Zelensky says that he's now open to an audit on how Ukraine spends US taxpayer dollars. I'm sure many Americans would like to see that. We know that Ben Shapiro, who's the host of a Daily Wire show, travelled to Ukraine to speak with Zelensky, and he asked him if he would be willing to do an audit on how Ukraine spends US taxpayer dollars, to which Zelensky said, of course, there's nothing to hide. Let's take a listen.
How do you answer those questions? What kind of transparency can you provide to the American people to guarantee that their taxpayer dollars are being used in the best possible way to fight Russia, to defend Ukraine, and to ensure that if the United States wants, would an audit be possible by the United States of where those dollars are going?
We are ready to have any inspections from the very beginning of the war. The inspectors coming from the United States, Europe, and our own inspectors, they're working. We have complete reporting, counting, absolutely transparent within the Ministry of Defense. There is access to all the figures starting from the very first year of the war.
Hillary, do you buy this? Are we really going to get an audit?
Well, he said so. Actually, since the Pentagon in the US hasn't passed an audit for over 7 years, it'd be interesting to see if they could, Zelensky can pass this audit. But it is important he says yes. Why? Because there has been a lot of attention over here and a lot of reports, and I don't know where they've originated from, of the Ukrainian, many actually ministers being I've seen reports of them being in Monte Carlo and elsewhere, and you see cars like Brigadis and Maseratis with Ukrainian plates saying, and the caption always is, this is where your taxpayer dollars are going to. Now, where those reports have originated, if they're Russian misinformation, I don't know, Gabriella. That is not something that I've ever seen proven, I've seen any proof of. So I think he was definitely smart to agree to an audit, and I think American taxpayers would feel far better if we did see some audit results. I think that he would garner more support. So it definitely was a smart answer. Whether or not he delivers upon it, that's another question.
Well, speaking of American taxpayers, I'm sure many are thankful that the Trump administration is in power and Trump has been backing Elon Musk to get to work with Doge. And as Elon Musk is right now preparing to kind of step back from his service in the Trump administration, I couldn't agree more with David Marks's piece in Fox News claiming that America owes Elon Musk a debt of gratitude for exposing and ending waste, fraud and abuse. Hillary, can I get your take and your assessment of just the kind of impacts that Elon has made?
Well, Gabriella, it's very interesting to hear you say you're very grateful to David Marks. You couldn't be more grateful, and you're not an American taxpayer as far as I know. I am. I totally and utterly agree with you. In fact, even more so because it's my money. Yes. You're right. I mean, actually, what's very interesting, what I have seen over the years living here in America is actually President Obama, Clinton, Bill Clinton, as well as when Hillary Clinton was running, they've all said for years that there's been fraud, waste, and abuse. And actually, it was President Clinton who let go of 377,000 federal workers. And Obama actually was the one that was called the deporter-in-chief, all these illegals taking American benefits. So they've all tried to do it. They've all said they were going to do it. President Trump is the only one that was able to do it. Yes, precisely with Elon Musk, who hasn't taken a salary and has basically done this for the good of the nation. I don't know who would say they're not grateful. And quite frankly, my proposition is that any Democrat that isn't grateful, like all those Democrats that sat down when President Trump was talking about tax breaks, they should not receive any discount on taxes, and they should not actually be part of the golden age that's going to come, because they're actually saying that they were happy with the way things were. So let all the benefits come to those of us that believe in, voted for Trump, and appreciate Elon Musk.
Oh, it's a fair point. And those who don't appreciate Elon Musk, those far left lunatics that have been out protesting, some have been setting Tesla cars on fire. The big question is, they're going to have to find a new enemy. Who are they going to go after?
Yes. And you know what's so hypocritical, Gabriella, is that they're setting fire to these Teslas. Well, first of all, I'm sure, I don't know the statistics, but I'm sure not many people dashed out and bought Teslas the day that Trump was elected. So a lot of those Tesla owners were actually original left-leaning, probably Democratic liberals, and also people that purportedly care about the environment. If you care about the environment, Why are you setting a truck on fire that's actually going to cause carbon dioxide damage to the environment? It is beyond hypocritical.
Oh, makes so much sense, doesn't it? Now I have to talk to you about CNN. Its primetime ratings dipped below 500,000 viewers, with less than 100,000 of those coming from the 25 to 54-year-old demographic. Now, the numbers are, of course, a troubling sign for the network. Hillary, are you surprised? Why are the ratings just tanking?
Yes, they are. And this is not just recent news. This has been a steady decline, rather like a ski slope, Gabriella. And what's interesting is, where are those viewers going? I can tell you one of the networks they're going to, and that is Newsmax. I'm a proud contributor at Newsmax. They're now the 4th watched network, right behind Fox. And I would say that I know definitely the 8 p.m. hour, 9 p.m. hour, Rob Finnerty and Rob Schmidt have definitely exceeded the CNN ratings. Now to the other part of your question, which is why, when you watch a network that is consistently wrong, you can't really believe what they're saying. So why would you continue to watch somewhere where the predictions are wrong and the opinions are wrong? And what's very sad, actually, I don't think Ted Turner ever set out to have a left-wing propaganda network. He did set out and was the first innovator, actually, for 24-hour news. I personally find it sad. I would like to just see news, and you don't have that anymore, certainly not from CNN.
Yeah, too many lies have been spun, as you say. Opinions are so off and really not connecting with the average American, in my opinion. And I think as well, many people are tuning into digital programs. Many are getting their news on X, and they're happily switching off from CNN. Now, I have to talk to you about what's going on in Canada. Canadians are heading to the polls. It appears that the Liberals are poised to win their 4th consecutive term in office. We know that Trump has trolled Canadians on election day. He's taken to social media joking that he was on the ballot. Calm down, everyone, it is a joke. And repeating his call for Canada to become the 51st US state. Now, it appears that former central bank Governor Mark Carney will be the winner. We'll wait to see. Hillary, what's your assessment of Canadians just getting another Justin Trudeau with him?
Well, that is really how it looks. Mark Carney, certainly as the head of the Bank of England, was actually no great force in terms of economic change nor prosperity. So I actually think this is rather sad for Canadians. The definite that has come out of this is the Canadian national spirit. There's actually been quite a few commercials with their elbows in the air referring to the hockey move that the Canadian ice hockey successful players have used. It's been a rallying cry for Canadians to rally behind him, since he's obviously the opposing political view for President Trump, and because many Canadians have been rallied with this thought of not wanting to become the 51st state. I do actually think it's a great pity, because I think most Canadians would be certainly more prosperous if they were part of the US. And also, one of the things President Trump has said is that the Canadians, they don't provide for their own national security. I don't think many people realize this. Americans, the American taxpayer, provides for Canadian security. So I think the Canadians need to step up for a lot. But yes, you're right. The election results are looking like it will be Mark Carney. And this is a drastic change from as recently as December, when they were polling at about 11%. They went into this election tied with Pierre Poilievre, the more populist conservative candidate. Of course, it's a parliamentary system. There are 343 seats at stake. And like in the UK, people vote for their local congressman, and then that seat then determines who will be prime minister, looking like Mark Carney. The polls have closed here on the East Coast. They will close at 10 p.m. on the West Coast, 7 p.m. their time, and then we should know more tomorrow. However, their ballots are still paper ballots, Gabriella, so it will take a while for the concrete results to be counted.
Okay, and Hillary, finally, there was really sad news over the weekend that Virginia Duprey, who of course accused Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein of sexual assault, has died. Now, her family confirmed that she died by suicide. I've seen a lot of theories circulating online, particularly an old post that she wrote years ago resurfaced claiming that she wasn't suicidal. Of course, there were always going to be these theories brought up, just as there are conspiracy theories around the death of Jeffrey Epstein, but her family has confirmed her death was by suicide. It raises the question, I suppose, that we really want answers to. Are we ever going to see this Epstein client list that supposedly exists? And also, Hillary, I know you've spoken about this previously, but I want to get your reflections. Is her death a reminder of just how evil Epstein was?
Yes, yes, and yes. One thing I will add, actually, if I could, is with regard to the suicide, yes, you were correct earlier when you said that she had written a note and made it public that she was not suicidal. However, that was over 2.5 years ago, and she has recently separated from her husband and is going through a custody battle, which I think for any mother is something that's very distressing. And also she'd had an accident recently, hit by a bus, and she posted she only had 48 hours to live. The bus driver then refuted that the accident was that serious. So there was a number of things here. Was she telling the truth? Was the accident that serious? So some things that she was saying herself were rather discombobulated, and it wasn't a straight line of truth. So always surrounded by something other than a straight line here. What I will say is there are many people who would like to see those files. I don't know that they'll ever become totally public. Why? Because there's too many people that are too powerful in too many places that don't want them to become public, Gabriella. And I think that behind the scenes, they're the ones that are controlling those lists. They were supposed to be made public right after Trump came to power, and they weren't. So that remains to be seen. And I think it's somewhat doubtful that we'll ever know sort of the whole truth.
Yeah, it's very sad. It was so sad and so disappointing. There was so much hope when Trump came in that we would get all of the truth, all of it. Who knows if we ever will. Hilary Fordwich, president and founder of Strellmark, thank you so much for joining us in Power Hour.
Pleasure. You're welcome, Gabriella.
Joining us now is Chief Economist at the IPA, Adam Kryton. Adam, thank you for joining us. The Australian federal election is just 4 days away now, and this campaign is going down as perhaps the most uninspiring that we've ever seen, and the standard has not been that high to begin with. Chris Uhlmann wrote a piece in The Australian over the weekend claiming that in 6 months from now, no one will recall any part of this campaign because not a single word adequately addresses a radically changing world. He goes on to say that this campaign says nothing and says it badly, words without wit, wisdom, meter or memory. And I couldn't agree more. Adam, you were covering the US election last year, which was just a blockbuster due to Donald Trump's brilliant campaign skills. I mean, how pathetic is our election campaign comparing it to America's? And what does it really say about our politicians and Australians?
Yeah, look, certainly the contrast is extraordinary with the US. Look, I think it's partly because of our compulsory voting system. That means that both the major parties need to target their message to the person in the middle who doesn't really care. And so you end up with a system that produces politicians that talk in slogans and sound bites and don't speak very deeply. But that said, even by Australian standards, I do think this campaign has just been dreadful. It's not the election Australia needs. You know, we're in a crisis of falling living standards. There's great geopolitical uncertainty. And you know, we're just talking about basically boosting house prices. That's the centerpiece of this election is you know, which party is going to boost house prices more, basically. That is somewhat depressing. Look, what are the structural reasons for this? It's hard to know why it's so bad. I mean, I think the coalition actually deserves more criticism here because it's just been Labor light, in my view, throughout the whole campaign. I mean, sure, if it's going to accept Labor's economic agenda, at least set the cultural agenda, which it's tried to do in the last few days of the campaign with the Welcome to Country stuff. And I think they should have come out a bit harder on that earlier because, you know, we just had a vote in this country on The Voice, which was overwhelmingly no. It was overwhelmingly a vote for unity. And I think the opposition leader could have tapped into that on Anzac Day and afterwards and you know, really won the last week. But, you know, he's tentatively done that. But if you look at the polls or the betting markets, let's face it, it's not looking great for the coalition at the moment on Saturday.
Yeah, and with the Welcome to Country stuff that you mentioned, Peter Dutton has declared that Indigenous Welcome to Country ceremonies are overdone and says that they cheapen the significance of what it was meant to do. And it appears the majority of Australians agree with Peter Dutton on this. The latest news.com.au poll found that 65% feel that Welcome to Country ceremonies should stop completely. Now, many Australians feel that they are tokenistic, they're overdone, and guess what? They do nothing to improve the lives of Indigenous Australians. And of course, this reached boiling point during Anzac Day at the ceremony at the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne, which was interrupted by booing from neo-Nazis, which of course was absolutely not appropriate at a service, which is meant to be a time for reflection. But many veterans have expressed how inappropriate it was for a welcome to country to be held at an Anzac Day service, many saying it was a slap in the face. And I agree with Peter Dutton. There is absolutely a sense across the community that welcome to country ceremonies are overdone. And the sad thing is that we're still talking about this issue, and it takes away a really important conversation that should be had about how to actually improve outcomes for Indigenous Australians.
Yeah, certainly. Look, I was shocked, kind of generally the political and media class on Friday and the days afterwards. They were shocked that Australians might not want a welcome to country on Anzac Day, when as you've suggested, that's the majority view, certainly from that news.com poll. And I would say, I haven't seen evidence, but I reckon if you surveyed men and women in the armed forces and veterans themselves, it would be overwhelming. 80%, 90% would not want a welcome to country on Anzac Day.
I agree with you.
Insulting. You're welcoming soldiers back. So I don't think it's a politically contentious position to say let's not do that on Anzac Day. Look, it's virtue signaling. Tony Abbott in recent days has come out and said that. He suggested that the party really should have taken a harder line on it, as I suggested earlier, and I think he's right. I think Australians are sick of the division of this sort of virtue signalling stuff, which is shoved down people's throats. I think the Prime Minister this week, in the final debate, he said, people can choose whether to do it or not. But that's not the reality of the situation. It's everywhere. Even when you land in a plane in Qantas, you get it. I mean, I was shocked when I got back from the US in January for the first time in a few years. And when the plane landed, there was a welcome to country. I thought, what is going on? This is very strange. And then, of course, I've had it for every Qantas flight since. So it's the country has changed rapidly culturally. And, my view is that's not all for the best, and I think probably most people share that view.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, Adam. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to talk to you about former Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews, because in news that should surprise no one, he is a liar. He lied to our faces constantly during those painful, lengthy press conferences where he claimed that he was imposing the world's toughest lockdown restrictions due to medical advice.
There will be a curfew on advice from the Chief Health Officer from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. each and every day. That comes into effect from tonight. I'm asking people to curfew from 9 p.m. The rules don't kick in until midnight, but I'm asking people to observe that curfew from 9 p.m. tonight. From 11:59 p.m. this evening, all of these changes will become effective. The curfew, obviously, because it's at 9 p.m, we'd ask people to observe that from 9 p.m, even though it doesn't come into legal effect until just before midnight tonight. That is on direct advice from the Chief Health Officer, and he'll be the next to speak, and he can explain to you why he's provided that advice and more.
Yeah, what a hero. I mean, locking Victorians in their homes, destroying businesses, plunging the state into debt, sparking really a dark and very real mental health crisis in Victoria. And it's now been revealed that the decision to force millions of people to live under a curfew was not based on health advice. Documents obtained by the Herald Sun reveal that the curfew was proposed without any formal input from health authorities. So Dan Andrews, he has the nickname as Dictator Dan, and that couldn't be more true. Adam, you're in Melbourne. How are Melburnians feeling now this truth has finally come out? A truth I think we all suspected, and it has been revealed.
Well, look, fortunately, I was in the US during the worst of that lockdown in Victoria, and I've been living here for the last few months, and I think people are really scarred by the experience. Kind of when they do talk about it, I think they're ashamed. It's a mix of shame and embarrassment about what happened, and I think this is, this just really worsens the wound, this new story that's come out that suggests, as I expected at the time, I was writing about it for America, writing about it from afar, but, the idea the health advice said to lock down people in general, let alone between specific hours of 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. was always complete nonsense. It was just there because certain politicians enjoyed the sick exercise of power. I think that's all it was. It was all about politics. It wasn't about health science. It was about political science. And the devastation, I mean, as a result, it's just extraordinary. I mean, I hope people never forget what Victoria went through with the quarantines and the shutdown of certain apartment blocks, the destruction of people's human rights for hundreds and hundreds of days, and their death outcomes were worse than any other state. So what does that say about the effectiveness of lockdowns? I mean, it was a shameful episode in Australian history. well, and the Western world more generally, I would say, but particularly Victoria, there was no health advice, there was no pandemic plan that had been written in any Western country ever that suggested to lock a population down because of a virus ever. And yet we did it, and we did it because we wanted to copy communist China. I don't want to rant about this, it's one of my pet topics, but it's just, it just made me angry listening to that press conference of him lying back. I assume that was 2021. I mean, the height of the man. And well, I think there's been other reports that he doesn't like going outside now in Victoria, and that probably goes to to the fact that he gets screamed at quite occasionally.
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember living in Melbourne through the horrific COVID period, attending many of those press conferences. And I tell you what, the anger was very much alive then. I remember going to press conferences that were rarely held outside, but I went to a couple that were, and there were people heckling and shouting, and there's so much anger. And of course, there would be when he was putting Melburnians through, such horrific circumstances, things that people shouldn't have to live through, taking away so many freedoms. But over in the US, Donald Trump is not going to let Americans forget about the lies that we were all told during the COVID pandemic. The Trump administration has overhauled the official covid.gov website into a website that reads lab leak, displaying evidence that COVID came from a lab in Wuhan, China. And the website also names Anthony Fauci as a person who wanted to cover this up. And it points out how damaging lockdowns were to not only the economy, but the mental and physical health of Americans. Now, this, of course, would have been better 5 years ago, but I love that Trump has done this. It is an important reminder that we should not forget what we all went through 5 years ago, and it's important that it's out there.
No, look, it really is. And just to what we were discussing earlier, I mean, with the lockdowns in general, if you look at the US, it was states like Florida and Texas that did the least, and states like California and New York that did the most in terms of lockdowns, but their death outcomes are actually the same. So these extremely destructive policies were not effective, and yet they are extremely socially and economically damaging. The same is true in Europe. If you look at Sweden, that country ended up with the lowest excess deaths in all of Europe, and yet it's the only country that did not do a lockdown. So again, it does suggest quite obviously to anyone who's, who has an IQ over 50 that lockdowns were not particularly effective and yet were extremely destructive. So look, it's great the Trump administration has put that up finally. And the issue of the lab leak too, I mean, how extraordinary. That was the obvious explanation from the start, right? You had this virus leak in the only city in China where there was a viral institute that actually looked at viruses like that. Like COVID, and yet people were like, "Oh no, it definitely didn't come from the lab."
Not possible.
It goes to show you the power of propaganda. It goes to show you the power of propaganda. The whole mainstream media basically fell in line behind that nonsense.
Absolutely.
And Anthony Fauci, who you mentioned, I mean, he commissioned research which was meant to say that a lab leak was impossible. Of course, now we know that was all propaganda. It was all corruption, and it's so great that's all come out. The sad thing about all this is that a big chunk of the population have basically lost total respect for so-called experts. In the health departments, health authorities, scientists, they've seen how corrupt the whole process can be. And this is a bit scary because if there's actually a serious pandemic next time, and in my view, COVID should not have been considered a serious pandemic, but if there's a real pandemic, then no one's going to believe what we're told. That's a
exactly
problem.
Right. Absolutely. Well, we have to look at those countries like Sweden that you mentioned and other states in the US that didn't lock down and had better or the same outcomes. That has to be a lesson or something we can take away for next time, when there is next time, which could be more serious than COVID. But Chief Economist at the IPA, Adam Kryton, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us on Power Hour. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me.
Joining us now is Kinsey Scoffield, commentator and host of the To Die For Daily podcast. Kinsey, great to see you again. First Lady Melania Trump has turned 55, and Melania was with her husband in Rome for her birthday. She was attending the funeral of Pope Francis, and she didn't share anything about her birthday on social media. But the White House has marked the occasion, posting a series of photographs of the incredibly stylish First Lady. And Kinsey, one of the most iconic looks, in my opinion, and one of her most recent looks, has to be her outfit at the inauguration. She has such a strong hat game, don't you think?
She does. It's very British royal family, so obviously I'm a fan. We have, if not one of the most beautiful First Ladies in the entire world, in the history of the White House. And it's appalling that we don't see some of the fashion magazines here in the States celebrating that, celebrating her strength when it comes to fashion and her beauty. And it's not just her beauty, it's her grace, it's her sophistication and her loyalty. I mean, I don't know if you've been monitoring the way Michelle Obama's gone off the rails, the way she talks about Obama on her husband on her podcast, the way we never see her with him anymore. The loyalty we see from Melania is just as you could tell her heart's just as beautiful as her face, and I really admire that.
That was so well said, and good point when you compare Melania Trump to Michelle Obama, and just some of the comments that we've been hearing from Michelle Obama lately. Doesn't appear like there's too much happiness there between her and her husband. But look, the White House shared a series of photographs. There's also this beautiful photograph, this black and white image of Trump and Melania where they are holding hands. And the First Lady is absolutely a fashion icon. Here's another shot of her at the pyramids. I mean, she just looks incredible. And as you say, she's not really appearing on the cover of fashion magazine. She's never appeared on the cover of Vogue. Why is that?
Because people are so blinded in our media, in our mainstream media, by their Trump derangement syndrome that it bleeds into common sense. This is a gorgeous woman without a shadow of a doubt. I would buy that 12-month calendar of those pictures you were just showing me. I'd hang it probably on my wall. So I think that it just gives you better insight into how nasty our media truly is about our current president and his beautiful, gorgeous wife.
Yeah, and we haven't seen that shift at all. Anyway, happy birthday to the First Lady, Melania Trump. I want to speak to you about Katy Perry. She's struggling to sell tickets to her show. She's not just a pop star, she's now apparently an astronaut after that 11-minute trip in space. But she's reportedly struggling to sell tickets to her show, the Lifetimes Tour, in several US states. More than half of the seats at the nearly 20,000 person capacity Toyota Center in Houston remain available for May 7. This comes after her backlash over that Blue Origin space flight. And to remind everyone, she was up in space for 11 minutes, and that was apparently for the benefit of the Earth, according to her. And she, of course, kissed the ground for the cameras after she landed. I mean, Kinsey, are you surprised that no one's really rushing to buy tickets to her show?
No, I think that we're really seeing this backlash. When you think about the Blue Origin thing, I think we're really seeing this backlash when it comes to the unapologetic, selfish 1%. And I do think that that's why people are over Katy Perry. Beyonce is struggling to sell tickets as well. The joke is that Happy Meals are the same price as the worst Beyonce ticket that you can get right now. And I will stress, though, that I have heard sources at Live Nation, the tour promoter for Katy Perry, immediately had reservations about her ability to sell out stadiums from the very get-go. So I think that, unfortunately, they didn't go with their gut here, and this is looking, they're red in the face now. They're embarrassed.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's chat about Meghan Markle. She couldn't be more cringe if she tried. She addressed a crowd at the Time 100 Summit in New York, where she was asked about how busy she's been pursuing her dream of being a reality star, being an influencer. And here she is making it known just how busy she has been and just what a crazy time it's been for her.
Meghan,
hi.
We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
I first want to just say congratulations to you on everything that you've done and everything that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been a very full, it's been a full few months
Full
for
year.
sure. Yeah.
So this conversation is about her journey, your journey. And I want to start.
We have 20 minutes?
Yeah, we do.
It's been a journey.
We do. We can go over.
I mean, when I listen to Meghan, I am just reminded that there's nothing authentic there. She went on to say she's now the happiest she's ever been. She claims to be this entrepreneur without really acknowledging that her level of fame is because she married a prince. You know, the BS from Meghan just never seems to stop.
Well, I'd like to just reiterate the 1% comment. I mean, is this not the perfect example of I am completely unrelatable? I've been given so many opportunities because of my proximity to the British royal family that I have spoken so horribly about. I tormented the Queen in the last few years of her life. I tormented Prince Philip in the last few years of his life. And now I've tormented King Charles in the last few years of his life. I mean, she is relentless, she is shameless, and she is exhausting. You are not a successful female entrepreneur. I can list more fails on both of my hands. Where's American Riviera Orchard? What happened to Spotify? You've dropped out of the not just 100, but 200 when it comes to the podcasting charts today with Confessions of a Female Founder. The critics were horrible about With Love, Meghan. You sold inventory that you didn't have on asever.com. People are still waiting for their refunds. This is a joke, and I'm tired of some of these media outlets continuing to elevate this person when the reality is she's a grifter. Fake it till you make it. We don't accept that anymore. We want authenticity.
Well, this Meghan Markle PR machine is right now in full swing. She sat down for another podcast interview with the founder of IT Cosmetics, Jamie Kern-Lima, that was released today. And at one point, she broke down in tears, speaking about being a mother and about love languages. And she took another swipe at the royal family, suggesting that really being part of the royal family was being in the trenches. Take a listen.
Are you in love now more than ever, more than you've ever been?
Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine at the beginning, everyone has like butterflies and then we immediately went into the trenches together.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, like 6 months into dating. So now 7 years later, when you have a little bit of breathing space, you can just enjoy each other in a new way. And that's why I feel like it's more of a honeymoon period for us now. Oh my gosh, I work so hard and I appreciate what hard work looks like. I like working hard. And I'm still working hard, right? The moment that everything sells out, it doesn't mean that we're done.
Yeah.
It means we're working on replenishment and what are the next SKUs and what's the next tranche of products and what's the timing on that and writing the newsletters and writing the social media captions and making sure that all that feels in line and what's the cadence of it and what's the photography that we want to do and what do I want to wear for those shoots, while also editing all the time-coded notes for season 2 of With Love, Meghan, and then being in edits for the podcast and being a mom and a wife and a friend.
So Meghan Markle takes yet another swipe at the royal family and then decides to go on this huge rant, almost out of breath there, detailing every bit of work that she does. You know, being one of the most privileged people on the planet, she still won't talk about how hardworking she is, which includes coming up with Instagram captions. I mean, we never hear other real leaders talking about how hard they work. You just see it in their actions. But for Meghan Markle, you know, of course, she's the exception, Kinsey.
Well, she also had to tell us at the Time 100 thing that she's the happiest she's ever been. How many people do you know when you're sitting across from them and you know that something really good in their life is going on? How many people do you know have to convince you that they're the happiest that they've ever been in their life? I mean, this is all a stage. You know, this is all just Meghan Markle's stage. We're expected to buy it. But she said she was in the trenches. She alludes to being in the trenches when she was in the British royal family. Girl, you lived in a castle. Like, you got a princess title. People were falling at your feet. People would run your bathwater for you. I mean, I could list the things, the perks. I could list them forever. The trenches. She has got to. The Delulu is on another level. Sometimes I envy it.
I have to agree with you there. It is on another level. Kinsey Scoffield, commentator and host of the To Die For Daily podcast. So great to talk to you. Thank you for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you.
And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.